Hi, I'm Elizabeth. This is the Bookish North and the video where I talk about what I've been reading and what I haven't been reading in the week that went by. So what I haven't been reading are all of the books I had started before this week. So we have The Door by Magda Szabo, we have The Years by Annie Ernaux, and we have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, none of which I have read a single page in. I have been listening to the audiobook I started last week, but I didn't actually finish it. I have about an hour left, so I'm gonna save that for next week. But what I have been reading is the TBR I set myself for Space Opera September, and if you wonder what that is, I will leave links down below that will explain it and will also explain what I'm talking about if you don't understand that. So the first book I read for that was Hexarchate Stories by Yoon Ha Lee, which is the book that sets me out on the rebel track for this readathon by finishing what is called Challenge 2B, which is to read a diverse author with a diverse cast of characters, and this book definitely ticks off that. So this is a collection of short works connected to the Machineries of Empire trilogy that starts off with Nine Fox Gambit, and I have read and adored that trilogy, and to be honest I think you should have to be able to enjoy this book. This does not stand very well on its own in my opinion, but I mean, for someone like me who adore this universe, it's always good to get more. I always want more of things I enjoy. So this is a collection of a lot of very short stories, or more like scenes, where you learn a lot more about particularly Shuo's Jadao from his actual lifetime. You see him with his family, his mother, his siblings. You see him during the university years or academy years. You see him during campaigns, and I enjoy that. You also see him visiting a brothel in a really saucy story. I enjoy that as well. Almost like reading fan fiction of his own work. And then there are a couple of longer, like proper short stories, which I enjoyed more because they had a purpose and they had a plot, and they sort of reminded me more of the original trilogy, and yeah, they had that kind of nerve and that kind of feeling that I enjoyed in the trilogy. And then the final story in here is actually a novella. It's like 110 pages or so long, and it's also the only story in here that takes place after the events of the trilogy. More precisely about 2 years after the events of Revenant Gun, and that one I really enjoyed because that really had the same kind of nerve as the original trilogy. It has a proper plot, it has a relationship between the characters and this kind of complex things going on where you don't quite understand until the very end. And I also really enjoyed how it ended, because it certainly opened up for the possibility of more books in this series, which I would be more than happy to accommodate. Please give me more. So yeah, overall I am happy to have read this. I really enjoyed it, particularly the last story, which was just more of what I enjoyed so much in the trilogy. If you have read the trilogy and enjoyed it, you should read this as well to know what happens next. And if you haven't read the trilogy, you should not read this. You should read Nine Fox Gambit instead. So there's that. And then the next thing I read is supposed to fulfill the prompts or the challenges of reading a book published before I was born, and I also meant it to fulfill the prompt of reading a novella. It is Orphans of the Sky by Robert A. Heinlein. I really do enjoy or like the cover of this. I think it's very cool, and I think that was the reason why Celia bought me this as a present, which is why I last week couldn't remember having bought it, because I hadn't bought it. I had been gifted it. So sorry for forgetting that, Silja. And also sorry for this review, because I really did not like this book. I have many issues with it, but I'm gonna stick to 2 for the purpose of this video. So first, I didn't really care for the writing of this. I think this took way too many easy way outs. I think the plot is fairly straightforward and very predictable. We follow a guy called Hugh Hoyland, and he lives on a generation ship, except that everybody on this ship has forgotten it's a ship at all. They just look at it as the entire world, the entire universe. They refuse to believe that there's anything else than this ship. And if you do tend to have any sort of ideas like that, you will be convicted of heresy and killed. So yeah, we have a ship full of people who don't know they're on a ship. And we have Hugh Hoyland, who is a very curious man and who figures out that this is actually a ship and that there is actually a bigger universe out there. And the plot is him trying to convince the crew of this fact and to sort of restart the journey that this ship was originally set out on. And yeah, that's the story. My problem with the writing is that it's a mess when it comes to point of view, because for most of the story we follow one or other of the characters in this restricted third person where you know exactly what that person knows. But whenever the author needs us to know something else, he just immediately jumps out of that into this omnipresent narrator that knows what everybody is thinking, what everybody has been doing their entire life, what will happen in their future, and what has happened in the entire lifespan of this ship. And it just feels like such an easy solution that whenever you sort of have written yourself into a corner, you can have this omnipresent narrator just explain everything and then move on. And then as the story sort of intensifies and goes on, things just randomly appear when they need to for the plot to go the way he wants. And yeah, I think there were just so many easy solutions, and the ending was so predictable, and yeah, the writing is just not that great. This was originally published as this was originally written as 2 separate short stories, and they were published together as this one book for the first time in 1969. But both of the stories were written in 1941 and just not published. But they were always meant to be together, and when I was reading this, I didn't really react to them not being one story. I read that after finishing the book, and they made perfect sense as one continuous story. But my second problem with this book is that it has not aged very well. The first part of that would just have been charming and fun if that was the only thing that I felt was wrong with this book. And that's the fact that on this state-of-the-art spaceship that has managed to keep everybody alive for generations and just keeps working, and everything is so intuitive that when some people actually realize it's a ship and that it's able to move, they will be able to understand how to move it, even though they have absolutely no training as pilots or navigators. And yeah, so this is a super advanced spaceships, but it has no computers, and all information available to the crew are in the form of paper books and encyclopedias. And you know, it's natural because this was written in 1941 and computers was not what they are today. So I mean, that doesn't really matter, that's very understandable. The other point though about how this is not aged well is the blatant misogyny in it, and that makes it hard to read. I mean, I'm able to ignore some of it, but this was just too much. And I know Heinlein has been accused or criticized for that in other works as well, but mostly I've seen him criticized for omitting women, and in this book I sort of wish that was the case, because that would have made the book better. There are like 3 or 4 mentions of women in this book. The first is of Hugh Hoyland's aunt when he comes to visit her and his uncle, and the one sentence we are told to describe her is this: his aunt glanced up as he came in, but said nothing, as became a woman. So yeah, that's his aunt. And then, like, towards the end of the book, Hugh has gotten ahead in the world, he's gotten some accomplices, he has a position, and he has a problem that he needs to ponder, and because of that he has some time to himself, and he decides to spend that time getting a woman, or 2 women to be precise. And it's described like this: Hugh availed himself of his leading position in the ship's new setup to select 2 women. The first was a widow, a strong, competent woman, adept at providing a man with domestic comforts. He set her up in his new apartment, high up in low weight, gave her a free hand, and allowed her to retain her former name of Chloe. Good of him to let her keep her name there. The other was a maiden, untrained and wild as a mutie. Hugh could not have told himself why he picked her. Certainly she had no virtues, but she made him feel funny. She had bitten him while he was inspecting her. He had slapped her, naturally, and that should have been an end to the matter. But he sent word back later for her father to send her along. He had not got around to naming her. So, yeah. Not feeling this book at all. I read it, you should just give it a miss. And yesterday evening, I started Provenance by Anne Leckie, which so far is very promising. I've read about 90 pages, enjoying it. I'm intrigued and curious about what's going to happen. And yeah. And then yesterday, I also had this sudden urge to read a bit of Assyrian history, as you do. So I started this massive thing called I Am Ashurbanipal, King of the World, King of Assyria, published by the British Museum. This was the companion book to the great exhibit they had of Ashurbanipal last autumn that I went to, and I bought the book, and it's massive and it weighs about 3 kilos, and because of that it's not very easy to read. I need a table. But yeah, I started it, I am enjoying it. I've read about 3 chapters since yesterday. So that was all. That's what I have been reading, what I haven't been reading, and we'll see what next week brings. Do I finish any of these books? Only time can tell. Until next time, bye.